You know, it really helps me that Star Trek understands that no matter what happens, no matter what we lose, no matter what fights we go through, cake will always be eternal. Does anyone want cake now? I'm really hungry for some cake. Alas. Anyways, welcome everybody to my review of Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 3, People of Earth. As per usual, I'm going to give my spoiler-free thoughts up front, so if you haven't seen the episode yet, don't worry. This is a safe space. We're all okay here. I'm going to give you my spoiler-free thoughts, and then we'll dive right into the spoiler section. So I know I am generally very positive on modern Star Trek episodes. Even when I'm lukewarm on episodes like I was with last week's episode of Star Trek Discovery, I generally try to be very positive. So I want to make clear the height of emotion that I am trying to convey when I say this about this episode. But this episode was everything that I want out of Star Trek. It gave us a really beautiful message about how holding to Starfleet's values and holding to the belief in that we can be better, that we can do better, that we can hold on to these core principles in ourselves can make the world better, actually does make the world better. And I really greatly appreciated that about this episode. Not that Star Trek Discovery hasn't done that before, but I just thought that it did it such in a very well-defined, articulate, and meaningful way. But it also wrapped all that up in some really, really wonderful thematic work around the idea of trust. There were so many storylines in this episode that all touched upon that theme of trust. Do we trust each other? Do we trust ourselves? Have we been able to trust that we can find our way back to the things that we believe in, find our way back to these values that we believe in? And again, I can't really talk about too much specifics because this episode gets kind of spoilery very quickly, but I just really appreciated that theme of trust just ran throughout all of these stories. One I'll specifically call out that has sort of a less spoilers stuff around it is I really loved the theme of trust between Michael Burnham and Saru in this episode, that they are kind of relearning to trust each other again after Michael Burnham has spent so long apart from them, and trying to relearn how they get to trust each other once again. I absolutely thought that the thematic work in this episode was wonderful, but it's also all brought into some wonderful, wonderful character work in this episode. There is something to be said about previous seasons of Star Trek Discovery where I feel like the plot often dictated the character development. Not that previous seasons of Star Trek Discovery's character development was bad by any means, but I often felt like there was a point where we would hit, like, a character's development would have to hit this point by this beat because they needed the plot to move forward. Whereas in this episode, I really felt like the plot actually advanced alongside the characters' arcs and actually complemented each other instead of the plot dragging the characters' arcs along with them. Again, one example that I'll give is Michael Burnham in this episode. I really feel like her sort of development as a character in the year that we've been without her, and sort of the things that she's wrestling with inside of herself about, like, not feeling like she's fully part of Starfleet anymore, really matched up with the plot, but it didn't feel like her arc had to meet with the plot, and that the plot didn't have to, like, pull her along in that regard. And so I really appreciated that. It's hard to talk about that specifically without getting into spoilers, but I just really appreciated the better marrying of character development and plot, instead of plot being the sort of end-all be-all and everything else sort of molds itself around it in this episode. Along those same lines too, one more thing I will mention is I loved the slower pace of this episode. Between this episode and last episode, even though I was lukewarm on last episode, I really did appreciate that both that and this episode had a much slower pace to it. Don't get me wrong, I love the Kelvin film style, like very fast action beats, kind of like always moving, always going forward kind of feel of previous Discovery seasons and the Kelvin films. Even episode 1, which I really liked of this season, had that same sort of Kelvin timeline feel, like we're moving very quickly. But also, I am appreciating that Star Trek Discovery seems much more confident in itself, and it's allowing itself to just sit and breathe and let the characters fill a scene and let us explore a scene with the characters and actually just be with the characters for a little bit longer than I feel previous seasons of Discovery would have done, where it's just like, all right, we're going to get the plot out, maybe we'll have a little character beat here and there, but generally we're just going to move on to the very next thing. This episode felt like there were just moments where we got to sit with the characters, and we still got to the plot. There's still action, there's still adventure, there's still some cool sci-fi stuff going on in this episode, but also that we got there at its own pace instead of, again, being kind of dragged along at sort of that quicker speed. And so I'm liking that Star Trek Discovery is having much more confidence in its voice in order to say that. The last thing I will mention, again, on that note, is I just love all the chemistry between all the actors and characters. It goes along with that confidence here. I feel like the writers really understand their characters now and where they want these characters to go and how they exist in the world. And there are so many scenes between characters where I really feel like they understand the characters and they are interacting with each other, and the actors are just having some wonderful chemistry between each other. Some specific ones to call out, between Michael Burnham and Tilly. They have some wonderful scenes together. Michael Burnham and Saru have some wonderful scenes together. Michael Burnham and Booker have some wonderful scenes together. I also, not just Michael Burnham, but Stamets and a new character, Adrena, who I have many joyous thoughts about, and I'll talk about that in my spoiler-filled section. But the chemistry here, just like last episode, is bar none. I think these actors are all working on the same page, and you really feel the joy that they have for each other through their work. You know that these actors all love each other and care about each other, and that comes across on screen, and they mesh so well. So I'm really glad that is coming across in the actual episode. But that's it for my spoiler-free discussion. I absolutely loved this episode. It's hard to talk about some of the things that I really loved without getting into spoilers. So if you haven't seen the episode, please go watch it. I adored it. Or if you just want to hang out and talk spoilers with me, even though you haven't seen the episode, I appreciate that. Come hang out. Let's have some fun. We're getting into spoilers right now. Now that we're in the spoilers section, I have so many thoughts on this episode. I am so excited to talk about it. I was not joking when I said that this episode has everything that I want from a Star Trek episode. And on that note, one of the things that I have always wanted from a Star Trek episode that has never really given me is something that I feel I would be remiss if I didn't talk about, and that is the character of Adrena, the new character that was introduced this episode. I'll talk more about the plot stuff with Adrena, but I really have to mention, as a non-binary trans person myself, I identify as a gender-fluid trans person, I'll be honest with you, it brought me so much joy to see a non-binary character in Star Trek. And it's hard to know exactly how that storyline is going to play out, because there's obviously a lot going on with Adrena's character, as we learn that, she's hosting a Trill symbiote inside of her. So I'm curious to see if that will impact her non-binary identity. Maybe her non-binary identity comes out of that experience, or it's something she's going to discover, or maybe she's already non-binary. It's hard for me to talk about that, but I do know from what we've heard outside of the show that, she is a non-binary character. And Blue Del Barrio, I think, did the character so well in this episode. And it made me, I just got to be honest with all of you, it warmed my heart. This is something that I've wanted for so long in Star Trek. Yes, there have been non-binary aliens, non-binary stories in Star Trek and things like that, but this is the first time a human character gets to exist as a non-binary person, as we exist in the real world in a show. And it just made me so happy. This is something I've always wanted. I am so excited that Star Trek finally is doing something it should have done years ago, decades ago. And it's doing it now, and really living up to Star Trek's message of diversity and inclusion, of letting people of different identities be part of the future of humanity. And I get to see myself as part of that now. Explicitly. I don't have to look into the metaphor of Dax or Trill symbiotes or anything like that. And even though I love Dax, I get to exist in this show, in this universe that has meant so much to me. And I am so happy and so excited about it. And I'm so excited to see where this character goes in the future. And I'm so excited that younger generations will have this in Star Trek now. They won't have to look for it. They will have a non-binary character. I'm honestly jealous a little bit, because I could have used that when I was younger. And I'm just so glad that Star Trek has that now. I'll be talking about that more in the coming weeks of this series for sure. I'm sure there'll be more to talk about, but I just would be remiss if I didn't call that out at the beginning of this spoiler-filled section, because it meant so much to me, and probably will continue to mean so much to me. as this episode goes out. And I also should say, I did like the fact that, again, we don't know if their non-binary identity will play an important role later on in the season, but I did appreciate that this show didn't go like, hi, I'm the non-binary character. Nice to meet you. Hi, how you doing? Because that's what Star Trek of previous eras would have probably done. We saw that in episodes like The Outcast or Progenitor. So I appreciate that the first thing we know about this character is not that they are trans, but that they are smart and an engineer and things like that. So, or she, I should say, they do use she, her pronouns in the episode. So I'm just very appreciative of that fact. All right, now that I've talked about all the SJW stuff, let's actually get into the plot of this episode. We start off the episode with a kind of an exposition dump, but sort of a montage of what Burnham was doing in the year since she left Discovery behind, and sort of the year where she was looking for Discovery. She's like Sherlock Holmesing it. At one point, she's like fighting a hologram and like slow motion punching. I just couldn't think of like the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes for that moment. I thought that this was a good way to catch us up with it. I'm a little bit saddened that we didn't get any stories with her off by herself, but I understand that the point that the writers were trying to get to with this was that she's changed, she's different, she's moved on in a lot of ways, and I feel like a lot of that is part of the writers trying to loosen Burnham up a little bit. She definitely had a lot of like stiffness to her character in her first 2 seasons coming out of her Vulcan upbringing. So I feel like them doing this is kind of loosening her up a little bit. But I also appreciated that it's not like swept under the rug, that it's dealt with later on in the episode, and we'll get to that. The sequence when she beams onto Discovery and everyone's giving her hugs and pats on the back, it warmed my heart. Again, goes to like this chemistry and this warm feeling that Discovery gives me. And so I really liked that moment. I liked her sort of like catching Georgiou's eye in that scene, but not necessarily saying anything or calling her out, and not hugging her, because I don't think that that would have been what either of them would have felt comfortable with. But I like that there's that sort of moment of addressing each other through the catching of the eye. So a good moment with Georgiou and the rest of the cast. It was absolutely beautiful. Speaking off of that, we have a moment with Saru and Michael walking in the corridor and sort of catching up, and Saru just kind of talking to her. And I really like that they had like another friendship moment there where like they put hands on each other's shoulders. It was very sweet. Again, going to that chemistry between all these characters that I'm really glad that you can definitely see the love that these actors have for each other, but also the writers understanding these characters. I really appreciate and this is something that I'll say about this show in general, and this episode in general, is the emoting that happens on Star Trek. I think, not that previous Star Trek shows were like emotionless by any means, but being a show set in the military or some form of the military, whatever you want to classify Starfleet as, emotions were much more buried down in previous Star Trek episodes and were reserved for more private settings, like in somebody's quarters. And I appreciate that this show really lets the characters just emote and feel emotions and feel them on their sleeves a little bit more, because I feel like in the future of humanity, we would be more open with sharing our emotions. You don't have to be these stiff, like, I'm a Vulcan, never going to feel emotions anymore. I like that Star Trek of this era is allowing people to just feel and feel comfortable with showing emotions. I feel like that's a very evolved view of that. And so I just like that throughout this episode, that the characters are just allowed to feel emotions in the moment. And I just really appreciate that about this version of Star Trek and Star Trek Discovery in particular, that there's just emotions being shown. And I know people have a problem with that, but I think that that's what humanity should be evolving towards, that we should be more open with our emotions. That's what Star Trek kind of has always been about, if you look back towards the original series with Spock and everything. So I really did appreciate that. Then we get the moment on the bridge where Burnham sort of catches everybody up on all the exposition that, dilithium exploded, what the burn was, things like that. I like that Georgiou calls out that she likes that Burnham has become much more comfortable with deception when they hear about this signal from Earth, that there's a Starfleet admiral on Earth that's calling everybody to Earth, Admiral Taru, or I forget how the admiral's name was said. We'll get to it later. But I like that Georgiou sort of calls out that Burnham's much more comfortable with the deceit. But the part of the scene that I really, really loved was that finally we get confirmation that Michael Burnham is not going to seek the captain's chair, and that Saru gets to be captain of the Discovery. And we get this really beautiful moment where he finally gets to sit in the chair, and a officially be called captain. I feel like this is something that we have all wanted as fans. Captain Saru of the USS Discovery. I feel like he's earned it ever since season 1, where he gave that speech in the Mirror Universe, pulling the crew together when Lorca was taken prisoner by the Emperor and everything. We've really seen shades of Saru coming to his own as captain, and especially after last episode, I think Saru really has shown he has the chops to be captain. And I was a bit frustrated in the marketing of this season that they were always kind of playing coy with that fact. It's like, we kind of knew Saru was going to become captain, but Doug Jones and everyone's like, oh, we don't know. We're not sure. But now I kind of also appreciate why they did that, because if they had just said that Saru is going to become captain, it would rob him of this really beautiful moment within the show. And so I liked that when Saru got to be captain, he got to sit down, take the chair, and just have his moment of accepting the captaincy. I really hope that Michael Burnham earns her captaincy at some point. My theory goes my hope is that this show the very last episode of the show should show Burnham getting to be the captain of a ship, if not Discovery. But I'm glad that Saru gets to be the captain right now. And I know that this is going to be a little bit SJWE, and I know it will probably annoy some people, but I feel like it's at least worth mentioning. I'm not being hypercritical, because I do think Saru has earned it, and I'm very happy and excited for Saru. But I do think there is something to at least note about the fact that while this show is one of the most diverse shows in Star Trek history, in fact, there's so many different identities and so many people of different backgrounds in this show, I do think it is worth noting that all 3 captains of the Discovery, Saru, Lorca, and Pike, have all been straight white dudes. Saru, I guess, isn't white or human, but he's played by a straight white human dude. So again, I'm not being overly critical of it. I'm not hating on it. Again, I think Saru has definitely earned it, and I don't see where else the writers could have done, because I think that was the best choice here, but it's something worth noting, and I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention it here. But again, I'm not being overcritical about it, but I know that it's going to be the thing that everyone in the comments is going to comment on, but I think it's at least worth mentioning here. Then we get this beautiful scene between Tilly and Burnham. There's not much to say about it. I think it's a really beautiful scene with them catching up, and I love their chemistry. I love, like, Tilly calling out her hair. I thought that was beautiful. And I like Tilly reconciling with the fact that they have moved on. That people lived lives, like her mother, her friends, her cousins, all lived lives without her, and sort of reconciling with the fact. I like we get a little human moment there. But the moment that I really love to call out in the scene is Tilly recognizing the fact that Burnham had let go of Discovery. And again, a brilliantly acted scene by Sonequa Martin Green here. The acknowledgement of that fact. Again, this goes to the writers really understanding their characters. Just the acknowledgement that, yeah, she probably mourned them and let go of them. And to have them come back has got to be a whole mess of emotions for her. But I just really appreciated that the writers took that moment to say, like, yeah, she probably let them go, saying that she probably would never see them again. Just a really brilliantly acted moment between both Sonequa Martin Green and Mary Wiseman in this scene. Then we get Book coming onto the ship and meeting Georgiou. I love that Book kind of knows all the people on the Discovery, because Burnham probably talked about them so much, again, showing their chemistry without Burnham being in the scene. Wonderfully written moment there. And I love that he's able to deduce that Georgiou is Georgiou based on just knowing about her. And also that Georgiou calls out that, Burnham's, you two are kind of dating, even though you won't acknowledge it yet. I like Georgiou having that insight that all of us can really see from the outside looking in. We definitely know they're going to date at some point in this episode, this season. That's just going to happen. So I like that calling out of it, and I like Georgiou sort of like acknowledging the fact that, like, Burnham's changed. Then we get a scene where we see all the dilithium on Discovery, obviously setting up that Discovery has a crap ton of dilithium, which is a wanted resource at this time in the Federation. And again, I like Burnham giving Book the dilithium and trusting him, again, going to that theme of trust that I talked about in my spoiler-free section. And it's really setting up that theme of, like, everyone just trusting each other. And if they trust each other, then we can believe in the best of ourselves. So I liked that moment here. And then we get a Saru and Burnham scene. I like Saru kind of questioning Burnham's judgment, saying, like, oh, you didn't really want the captain's chair, and so I'm kind of curious. You definitely changed, and so I just need you to explain why you want us to leave all the dilithium on Book's ship. That seems like a very suspect thing to do. Again, going to that theme of trust. Saru ends up trusting Burnham, and Burnham is trusting Book with their highly valued resource of their dilithium. So I appreciated this scene because, again, it kind of showed many facets of that idea of trust, and how Saru is kind of again, acknowledging that Burnham is a slightly different person here. Then we finally get Discovery spore driving to Earth. I love Book coming on the bridge and sort of having this awkward moment with Saru and being like, yeah, I'm here. I also like when they do spore jump, Book goes, oh shit. You didn't tell me about the spinning thing. So that was like fun. But then when they got to Earth, we learn that there's this force field generator there and that there's the United Earth Defense Force, not Starfleet. Saru starts explaining himself to the United Earth Defense Force. That is a mouthful. And they lie and say like, oh, we're a generation ship. You know, we were on a mission. We just finally got back. And then we get all the Defense Force people beaming on board, and we learn basically that Starfleet is not headquartered on Earth anymore. That Earth has now become its own self-sufficient government. It has isolated itself from the rest of the world, and it doesn't need anybody anymore, and Starfleet has left there because it would make Earth a target when Starfleet really couldn't defend Earth anymore. So I like that twist, and I like this idea that Earth is no longer part of the Federation. That's kind of an insane idea. Really lovely concept there, and I thought a great twist, because it would have been very easy if we had gone to Earth and Starfleet was just there and they were able to reconnect with the Federation. So now it's a mystery of where is the Federation? Does it exist still? And I like that we see with the military commander of the Defense Force that Earth has become much less trusting. Again, going to that theme of trust and lack of openness that runs throughout this episode. And I like that undercurrent of she does not trust the Discovery crew, and she is much more protective of Earth than we have seen in previous iterations of Star Trek. Then we get this wonderful scene where while the Defense Force is investigating Discovery, Burnham has Book put on a uniform. I like, again, it's calling out that Burnham has changed a little bit, that when she puts on the uniform, doesn't feel like it fits her anymore. But I also like the scene because it shows the wonderful chemistry between Book and Burnham. The two of them, like I said, they are so going to be dating at some point. It is so obvious to me, but I appreciate that unlike the kind of forced relationship between Burnham and oh my gosh, I don't even remember his name. Ash Tyler from season 1 and 2. That relationship always seemed like it was kind of forced to me, but I really like that they're taking their time with them getting a relationship. But honestly, the two of them have abundant chemistry, unlike unfortunately Shazad Latif and Sonequa Martin Green. Not that I hated Shazad Latif, I thought he was a fine actor, but he just didn't gel with Sonequa Martin Green as well as Book does. So I really appreciated the scene, and there's sort of jokes between each other, like the calling out of she's a queen. I want a guy who looks at me like Book talks about Grudge. Wonderful moment there. And his like you just wanted to see me get in this uniform. I also like that Georgiou pretends to be an admiral in the very next scene. Of course she would. That like she said, I need to add it, make it seem believable. And of course she would want to be an admiral. So that's a fun little bit for her. And again, she's calling out that Michael Burnham's changed. We're sort of getting a lot of calling of that out, but I like it from different people, sort of recognizing different aspects and appreciating different aspects of it. Book appreciates that she's changed because he's sort of seen how she's changed now that she's back on Discovery. Georgiou notices that she's changed and appreciates that she's changed, saying like, you've opened up, you've kind of seen past your Starfleetness, because that's what Georgiou sort of sees past because she's from the Mirror Universe. But Saru is also kind of pulling like, no, you moved beyond Starfleet. You need to kind of pull yourself back to it. So I like that Book, Georgiou, and Saru all kind of point out different facets of how Burnham's changed. So it doesn't feel repetitious of that idea, but it is sort of pointing at different ways to view Michael Burnham having opened up a little bit more. I also forgot to mention we did learn that that Earth is under constant attack from raiders by the name of Wen. So that's something that Saru sort of calls out and learns as well. Then we get an inspection down in engineering where we meet Adrena. I thought this was a lovely scene. Adrena just being such a know-it-all, saying like, oh, what's this? Is able to deduce everything. I thought that was great. And Tilly's just kind of like, we get it. You're smart. You're a child genius. Everyone here is smart. That was just really funny. And also, again, showed that Adrena is smart. So appreciated that. And I've already talked about my feelings on Adrena so far, so I won't stick on that point too long. But then we get into the whole situation, like the main action of the episode. Raiders come to attack. Discovery is not being trusted by the United Defense Earth Force. They're basically saying, like, ignore the Raiders. Just we need to attack them. We need to defeat them. We need to send them away. And Saru standing up for Starfleet values and saying, like, no, we need to talk. We need to try and actually create a dialogue here. Very Starfleet values-esque. And I like that Georgiou is sort of the constant, like, devil on Saru's shoulder, saying, you could do it this way. You could not do it the Starfleet way and actually do better. And so I like that sort of constant, like, push and pull between this whole section of Saru trying to stand up for Starfleet values, but he has Michael Burnham or Georgiou on his shoulder. Also, he's trying to, like, hide certain things from the Defense Force captain and, like, push back against the Defense Force captain. So I like that Saru is standing firm in his values throughout this entire scene. But then at this point, Burnham goes off with Book. I love the little scene where he gets, like, synthahol and he's like, oh my gosh, I can't even have, like, actual drink. I love the return of the synthahol joke to Star Trek. I really enjoy that. But Michael Burnham and Book go off on their ship to try and take on the Raiders head on and do a little bit of trickery. And I like that Saru ends up, again, having to trust Burnham and needing to believe in her, even though he's not 100% aware of what's going on with the situation. I did find it a little bit bothersome that Burnham wouldn't at least tell Saru that she was going to be doing something and just sort of takes the ship and offers up their dilithium without at least consulting Saru. So that was one little niggling part of this episode that I didn't like. But again, I also appreciated that Saru trusts in his own Starfleet values here because the United Earth Force is going to attack the Raiders. I love the complexity of the situation, by the way. It's kind of even hard to describe it, but it's conveyed very clearly and understandably in the episode. But the United Earth Defense Force is going to attack the Raiders, and Saru sort of puts Discovery in the middle of the attack and saying, like, no, you cannot attack these people. We need to discuss. We do not fire first. And so Saru puts himself in harm's way because he believes in Starfleet. He trusts in his Starfleet ideals to carry him through the situation. And I really, really appreciated that. One thing to note with that, though, is Detmer does push back against the orders, which we've already seen hints of last episode. There's something going on with Detmer. There's, she's experiencing either some form of PTSD, she doesn't trust her own self, or there's the theory going around that maybe she's infected by the remnants of control. It sort of infected her implant. Again, I can't really tell for sure. I don't have enough to speculate on here. There's also something to be said that maybe she has arium in her head, but I think after this episode, I think there's a little bit something more nefarious going on than my theory that it was like the remnants of arium, like memories of arium in her brain that will sort of resurrect arium at some point. But clearly, Detmer not trusting orders in this episode is clearly kind of hinting at the fact that something's up with her, whether it's PTSD or control in her brain or something else. So I like that subtle hint that it's not like, hey, look, pay attention, Detmer's got something going on, but there's like this subtle hint that something's off with Detmer. So I appreciated the subtleness of that, but calling out of it in this episode. Burnham and Book managed to capture the leader of the enemy ship, Wen, and kind of Saru and Burnham force the Earth Defense Force and the Raiders to come together and talk. And this is what I was talking about with earlier in the episode, that it's all about holding up Starfleet values and trusting things. It's not that there needs to be a fight and big explosion, we fight off the Raiders. It's about bringing these two people together to talk out their issues. And when they actually talk out their issues and trust each other and listen to each other, that they're actually able to get stuff done. I also should say, I really love the reveal that Wen was human after all, and that he wasn't an alien raider coming to attack Earth. While there's something to be said of, like, yes, we can see more aliens in Star Trek, I like this idea that when you sit down with someone, when you actually sit down and talk and try to get to know where someone is coming from and learning their problems and their issues, you will learn that they're not all that different from yourself. That the United Earth Defense Force lady was able to finally understand and identify with the Raiders' intentions when she actually sat down and learned, like, hey, they're dealing with problems too, problems that they could fix if they came together. And so that is sort of mirrored by the fact that he is revealed to be human and revealing this idea of that we're not so different if we actually sit down and talk. There's nothing more Star Trek than that, than just trusting each other, listening to each other, and that's able to resolve the situation, not a big fight scene. So I appreciated that Discovery was able to have its cake, see how I did that, and eat it too, with a big action scene, but also having it really rely on talking to each other, not fighting each other. That gets the day saved. And I like that scene of these two sides, the Earth Defense Force and the Raiders coming together to talk to each other, is interspersed with this wonderful scene with Adrena and Stamets, where Stamets basically goes to Adrena and calls out the fact that, hey, we know that you messed with the transporters. We know you put this thing on here. What's going on? And I like that he is able to get Adrena to open up by being, by trusting her, by telling her all this information about Discovery, saying, tells her about the spore drive, tells her about himself, that he has able to control the spore drive, tell them that they're time travelers. So I appreciate that Stamets trusts Adrena, and that is able to get Adrena to open up to him, and tell him that something's going on with her. So I appreciate that there's this sort of like political discussion of trust going on, but also the microcosm of Stamets learning to opening up to Adrena, and that getting Adrena to open up to him. So I'd like that sort of like marrying the macro, political version with the personal version of trusting each other. I also really loved the music during Adrena's scene. It was kind of playful and fun and kind of joyous. So great little use of music there. Jeff Rousseau, who does the music for Discovery, deserves some credit for the music during that scene. I really enjoyed it. So after everything is talked out, we have a wonderful scene with Saru and Michael Burnham, where Michael Burnham basically opens up and said, I don't think I'm fully back with being with Starfleet yet. I don't think I've fully found my way back to Starfleet and being a Starfleet officer. And I like that Saru trusts her. Again, that theme of trust is like, it's okay. We'll get there. And I'm willing to give you time if you want to still be my number one. And I like that they do it over Prime Giorgio's old telescope, this connection that they have between the two of them with their old captain and someone that they both looked up to. So I like that they were able to connect through that. And Saru is like, look, I know you're not fully here yet. I know that's going to cause some friction, but we're going to trust each other. And we're going to get through this together. And I'm going to trust you to be my first officer, and will hopefully bring you back to Starfleet. So I appreciated that scene. I thought it was a wonderful connecting moment between the two of them. Again, going back to that chemistry between these actors that I really feel on screen. And I'm really excited to see where this takes Burnham's character, with her kind of not being fully back in the Starfleet mode, which I think is a great way to take her. She's been a character who's been so firm, like, I am Starfleet. I will do all the Starfleet things at all times and never waver from that at any point. So I like that she's kind of loosening up from that point of view. And I'm kind of excited to see where that arc takes her throughout this season. So great little scene, and I liked it sort of coming out and capping off that theme of trust throughout the episode. Then we get a scene between Saru and Adrena, and I like that we get this sort of explanation that Adrena was the admiral that called them and pretended to be Starfleet, but is actually a Trill host. Again, we'll sort of see how that plays out in the future. And we'll sort of get discussions of how that might play into maybe her identity and things like that. So I'm very excited to see where that storyline goes. I'm always excited to see the Trill. They're my favorite species in all of Star Trek. So I'm glad that we're going to get more explanation of that. And I like that there's this, sort of explanation to the audience of what Trill are. And it makes sense because they did not know, I believe, in the 23rd century that Trill were hosts of symbiotes. That wasn't something that wasn't revealed until later on in the 24th century, as we saw in The Next Generation. So I like that gets explained. And I like the little call out to the sphere data as well, that little element of continuity that the sphere data would know about Trills, but the 23rd century Starfleet officers would not know because they wouldn't know until the 24th century about Trill symbiotes. So I'm excited to see where that storyline goes with Adrena kind of being a human hosting a Trill, and what that means for her and what that means for Starfleet, that, she has these memories of a Starfleet admiral inside of her. Very curious, excited, and obviously that's sort of set up to take us to the next stage of the mystery of figuring out where Starfleet and the Federation is. So we'll certainly learn more next episode. But then we get this really wonderful scene, and probably my favorite scene in this whole episode, where everyone's allowed down to Earth, and we get the lower decks crew members, Tilly and Bryce and Detmer and Owo and all of the kind of lower Dexian crew members of the Discovery go to Starfleet headquarters, or where Starfleet headquarters used to be on Earth, and see this tree that they knew when they were younger, and it was when it was much smaller, and just got to say, 930 years has passed, and yet we can still stand here and still be in the same place and see how things have changed, but how things are still the same. And there's still, as much as all things have changed, there's still these roots of Starfleet inside all of us. I think it was a really beautiful sort of thematic cap to this episode. Really wonderful scene, and I like the sort of picnic-y kind of feel that scene gave us. Again, it goes back to what I said last episode, that I'm really enjoying that the lower decks crew members are getting a lot more to do this season. They're not drawing focus away from the sort of main characters that we've come to know, but I am liking that they're getting a little bit more to do and say and just get to be kind of more fleshed out characters than they have been as more like just people that reacted on the bridge in previous seasons. So a wonderful little beautiful scene to end the episode on. That's everything that I have to say. I know I've ranted a lot about this episode, but I really loved it. Might be one of my favorite episodes of Discovery. I love the character development. I love the fact that we got a non-binary character that makes me so excited. I love the theme of being able to talk out our problems rather than the big action problems and trusting in Starfleet values to carry the day. I like that we get to have characters emoting more in Star Trek instead of being like stiff military people. This is everything that I want in Star Trek. I really loved this episode. What a joyous, wonderful episode. And I think we're really seeing Star Trek Discovery come into its own. It's getting that Star Trek season 3 bump that every Star Trek show seems to get, where it really finds its confidence in its 3rd season. So I'm very excited that Star Trek Discovery really feels like it's coming into its own finally. So that's all my thoughts. I have ranted long enough about this episode. I'm looking at the clock like, wow, I talked a lot. So let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of this episode? I'd love to hear all of that down in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget you can also help me out on Patreon. But beyond all of that stuff, I am just so glad you stopped by and hope that you, as always, live long and prosper. A huge thank you to my amazing patrons who make this channel happen, and an extra special thank you to Miranda Janelle, Ashley Allen Bokikio, Eli Berg-Moss, Ashlyn Solstice, Christina Dalliance, Greg Gillum, Stephen Kleinard, Boyd and Mary Beth Earl, Wellington Marcus, Wayne Twitchell, Buttoneer, Ish the Mad, Munir Amlani, John Steele, Gavin Robinson, William Stewart, Michael Beam, Spock TOS, BBD, Nathan Olson, The Sir Spence, Zach Cody, Bree Beecher, Maeve, Chloe Dollar, Subraxis, Wen Dizzle Bizzle, Tanya Trummer, Gretchen Badger, Dante St. James, Polly Mina, Piston Twisted Garage, Mark the Edge, and Din. I could not do this without all of you, so thank you so much, especially this month.